What is your I don't get paid enough for this shit story? Witness someone's literal I don't get paid enough for this shit story. I was at a showbiz, similar to Chuck E. Cheese. Might even be the same place. For a relative's birthday. All the kids are running about having fun. Playing games. Etc. Suddenly there is a commotion around the ball pit. Turns out some kid has had a serious diarrhea Hershey squirt blowout and it is all over in the ball pit. The little plastic balls are all covered with a thin film of booty butter. I'm across the room from the Code Brown near the counter where you trade in tickets for fake mustaches and Laffy Taffy and shit. The manager tells this teenager he needs to get to the ball pit right away. And is trying to hand him a mop. Not sure what a mop will do in this situation but I digress. Close bracket. In a hoe. The teen is not having it and loudly says, "Nah bro. That ain't me," and strolls out the door and into the sunset. I worked in popular nightclub at the time this happened. It was during a Pride event and we were slammed. Our capacity was 300 and ended up having over 1,000 people come in and out of the club in the 5 hours we were open. Somehow. Someone was stabbed by the little coat hanger thing that's on the back of the bathroom stall door. This individual managed to bleed profusely all over the bathroom stall. Half of our dance floor. And all over at least 30 individuals within the club and no one noticed. I'm not kidding when I say that it looked like a damn crime scene. Some serious law and order kind of shit. And yet somehow no one complained about the blood on themselves, the floor, or the bathroom until we turned the lights on. Cleaning up a shitload of semi-dried blood throughout our club after one, if not the, busiest time of the year was wretched. I was exhausted. Gagging from the smell of blood, booze, drugs and, most likely, other bodily fluids. After several hours of scrubbing and then getting up a few hours later to work another event, I realized that I hated bar life and needed to get out or double my hourly rate. A PT decided to have explosive diarrhea without giving us a warning when we were escorting her back to her room. She was naked so it got all over us. It's 5 hours into my shift and covered in watered down tea and I forgot my extra pair of scrubs at home. In that exact moment I thought I should get at least double my pay. Haha, nursing is so weird. There are some days I'm like, I can't believe how much money they're giving me to do this awesome job. And other days it's like, there is not enough money in the world to take responsibility for this circus. Double quote. It was a few years back. I just started this new job dealing with the plumbing system for this automotive factory. My supervisor gave me some gloves and a rubber overall suit. I had to go in this trench and clear the garbage out. Well, the trench was full of shit. And the gloves only reached to my wrist. The supervisor thought it was funny to not tell me about the elbow length gloves he had. So I eventually got shit all over my arms. At this point my supervisor was laughing uncontrollably at me. At that point I flung some shit at him that covered his face and actually went in his mouth. I was immediately fired. In 2012, I worked as a busboy at a Nick restaurant during summer between college sessions. There was a 2-day period of extreme heat and heavy rainfall that filled the sewers and started coming up the drains in the middle of the basement floors. The basement was for all the food prep, freezers, liquor and keg storage, etc. Within an hour, the grey-brown water had risen to our knees and there were hundreds of roaches swimming around trying to cling onto anything for dear life, mostly our legs. It was f***ing horrifying and I nearly quit on the spot but sucked it up. The restaurant stayed open the whole time and I was yelled at for not muffling my screams better. I'll see if I can find a pic I have of a waitress standing in the middle of it all sobbing her eyes out. Was working at a bakery coffee shop as a barista and cashier. Was just me on the floor late at night and I see a lady run to the bathroom. About 45 minutes later she runs out, gets her stuff and leaves. At this point I'm like shit. I gotta go check this shit. So I walk in there and there is toilet paper and paper towels all over the floor and stacked on top of the toilet. So I say a few profane words and go get some trash bags and gloves. As I start moving all the paper towels and toilet paper out of the toilets and surrounding floor I notice some blood. So now I know that was a very intense session for the lady. Then I notice that there is some unknown highly viscous fluids with some odd colors. I'm staring to get disgusted. I reach down to get the last bit and I feel something heavy. At this point I'm pissed because I think I just picked up a human turd. Look down and I see a f***ing tiny fetus in my hands. This was on Valentine's Day. Afterwards went to a bar for obvious reasons and the bartender I know gets me a beer. He knows what I like, and the name of the beer was My Bloody Valentine. Also I realized that the lady had a traumatic experience, so not trying to put focus on me. It was a bad situation for everyone involved. Note: on mobile, excuse formatting and grammar. I work at school. We had a sub for a 6th grade class come in. While standing at the door to the class, she suddenly has explosive diarrhea. It runs down her legs and leaves a puddle on the floor. 25 6th graders come screaming into the hall. I get them rounded up in another room and then go help the janitor clean and disinfect everything. Someone told her it would be okay for her to come back that day after she got cleaned up. Big surprise. She did it again. When I got home, my wife asked how my day was. I work at an ice rink. Every Saturday there is a birthday party for little kids. Because who doesn't want to fall on their face on the ice for their birthday, right? These people always bring their whole families and stay forever. One day, after the party is gone, we go into the party room to clean up. It was horrendous. There were water bottles full of brown stuff from the adults that I'm sure was beer or drugs. Pizza slices and boxes. The trash can had utterly overflowed. And the smell was gag-inducing. The thing is slimy and weird to touch, making me shiver as I tie it up. I take the bag out and prepare to move the drippy slimy thing when it freaking breaks. It gets all over the floor. The smell overpowers me and my co-workers. And a one-man job now requires all of us. While we're cleaning up, some kids try to steal some skates and our bags, making us 2 workers short as they are chased down. We finally finish cleaning up after a while. And as I take my inhaler and realize there is still stuff to clean up, I decide $9.55 an hour is not worth it. While in college I worked the front desk overnight at a local hotel. One quiet night I noticed a bunch of emergency vehicles go past the front door with their lights on. Next thing I know, I have 6 police officers and SWAT gear enter my lobby along with 2 plainclothes officers with Vice written across their massive bulletproof vests. As it so happened, someone was trafficking large amounts of cocaine through my hotel and the cops decided tonight was the night to run their sting operation. They caught one guy in the parking lot with 5 kilos of coke and had a warrant to search the entire 100-room hotel. I tried to call my boss to handle this, but she was drunk at a local bar and just told me to do my best. We didn't have any master key, so I had to make 100 cards while being closely watched by cops with assault rifles. Then I had to show them where all the rooms were, as the place had a weird layout. They were nice enough to let me stand behind them while they cleared each room so I wouldn't be shot. My boss finally showed up around 3 AM. Cops arrived at 10 PM, and I quit right there. I'm a pilot for an airline that operates smaller regional aircraft. The plane I fly is pretty nose heavy. So typically, if there is not enough bags in the rear cargo bin, and the plane isn't full, we have people sitting in the front move to the back. A few months ago we were doing an early morning flight with around 30 passengers. For some reason they were all assigned seats in the front of the plane, and nobody had any bags. After running the numbers, we ended up needing 4 people to move to the back of the plane. We told the flight attendant, who made an announcement looking for 4 people to move to the back. After a few minutes, nobody volunteers. Another announcement. Nothing. She comes and tells us that nobody is moving. I go back and try to explain why we need people to move, and that we can't leave until people do. Still, nobody seems willing to move. Sure, I could go back and tell people that they had to move or get off the plane, but it was 5 AM. I thought I would go get coffee instead. So after waiting to see if anyone would move, I just walked off the plane and back into the terminal to get coffee. Took my sweet ass time too. Came back and nobody had moved. I made the announcement, I see nobody has moved yet. Does this mean I have time for breakfast too? Suddenly everyone wanted to move. I was a technician manager at a cable company. As you all know, the companies and some of the techs are a bit, how you say, shitty. We received a complaint from a customer after one of our worst techs had been at the house. The complaint was that he took a shitty on the bathroom light hood in the attic. Double quote. Rightfully so, the customer was compensated. But when it came to the issue of removal, my boss directed me and another manager go out and buy cleaning supplies and clean it up. This had been sitting on an aluminum light hood for over a week. That's a week's worth of someone turn on this light and literally cooking the shit. No amount of gloves, face masks, and bleach can prepare a person to clean hot-caked human turds of aluminum while crouch on the thin end of a 2x4 in the confined space of an attic. For less than $15 an hour, I literally wasn't getting paid enough for that shit. I moved on some months later. I learned a new respect for all those people that deal with what the rest of us leave behind every day. I was working as an office manager for a distribution company. One of the employees came up and said there a weird smell in the warehouse and his direct manager wasn't around. I walk in the door of the warehouse and am immediately taken aback by the smell of urine. I ask what happened. No one knows. I ask when it started. They say they think in the morning. The smells gets even worse the closer you get to the mechanical room. I walk out to call his manager and figure out where to start when one of the guys has an epiphany. Hey, do you think this has anything to do with us pissing in that hole in the back? Double quote. Turns out, these guys didn't always feel like walking to the bathroom, so were peeing into a hole in the mechanical room that they thought was a magic black hole of nothingness. Unfortunately, the magic black hole of nothingness turned out to be the sump pump, which broke and proceeded to, well, I think you can figure out the rest. I didn't get paid enough for that shit. I was trying to cut a bolt 28 feet up with a steel grinder. I was at that height using an extension ladder. I couldn't tie it down because no one had rope. The grinder got bound against the steel, ricocheted and cut through my safety goggles. It cut off several eyelashes but didn't quite cut my eyeball. In a panic, I almost fell off the ladder. My panic made the ladder slide and fall. So I grabbed a column that was supporting it. I'm not afraid of heights, but I'm afraid of ladders. I threw down the grinder with all my might. Climbed down the column. Told my boss to get FK'd. ND filled up my car with the company credit card on the way home from my last day of Insanity Land Incorporated. Construction. I was a nursing student working part-time as healthcare aide. I was doing home care for a gentleman who lived in a trailer with very narrow hallways. He had just showered and was walking slowly down the hallway nude with a towel around his waist. He suddenly said, "Oh, I'm going down," and started falling forward. I tried to break his fall but was much smaller than him and it was difficult as I was behind him. His towel began falling off and he had a giant hard poop poking out of his ass. He fell down into his walker, so was hurt. Oh, and he had a giant cluster of tumors on his face that basically looked like a bunch of red grapes growing out of his head. They were very vascular, so they started to bleed when he went down. I couldn't move him in the narrow hallway, so had to call 911. It was the first Bonnaroo and they had not brought in nearly enough Porto-Johns. The shitty would literally mound up above the seat. It was nasty. Saturday morning rolls around and I hear the shitty sucker truck rolling through camp at sunrise. I stroll on over and wait for them to clean them out so I can take care of business. I see the guy open the first one up to clean it and he immediately slams the door shut and exclaim, "Up. Hell no. I don't get paid enough for this shit." Which got 24-year-old spaced out Tombin to laugh out loud at him. He then gets yelled at by his supervisor who tells him to dive in or go home. He looks at me, hangs his head in defeat and proceeds to start sucking shit. I felt bad for him after that. He had the worst job and was getting laughed at by a bunch of yuppie hippies to boot. He definitely wasn't getting paid enough, whatever it was. I worked in a juvenile prison for a while. I was in a classroom with some of the kids, basically babysitting until they went back to their cells. There was a CO who was getting under their skin, and I wouldn't let them go out into the corridor to antagonize her. One of the kids pulled his DCK out in protest and let rip all over a table full of files and classwork, so it all melted in a pool of papery piss. Also care packages full of shit being dropped out of cell windows. Thankfully not at me. Actually just the smell when you go into a prison block at 8 AM just after the entire population of that block has woken up and simultaneously taken their morning dump is I don't get paid enough for this shit story. In other news, I lived with a nurse when I was in college. She was doing a placement working with elderly people in a care home. One day she came home and told me that she had to help an elderly lady go to the toilet. The lady fell off the toilet mid-shit and sprayed it up the walls and all over my friend. My friend then projectile vomited on the lady, who projectile vomited right back at her. I stayed up overnight with my bosses to prepare for CES, Consumer Electronics Trade Show in Vegas. World's largest trade show. Caught the plane in the morning. Got a short night of sleep after over 40 hours of being awake. Woke back up. Spent an entire day preparing our booth, presentation of our hardware and software for the week. As it got into the morning hours, it became apparent that our shit wasn't going to work. So I stayed up another night trying to cobble our software together. Our demo didn't work when we arrived at the booth, and I was behind a curtain editing code on 2 laptops trying to get the shit up. After another 30 hours of no sleep, was sent back in the afternoon after I finally got something working. Averaged about 5 hours of sleep the next 3 nights. I knew it was a stupid waste of time even then. But, looking back on it, I realize how shamefully dumb the whole thing was. Working at a private school. Teaching a pre-K class with no benefits. No prep time. Coming in on evenings and weekends to catch up on work. Not being given the full set of training manuals for their special technique I needed to follow and wasn't well versed in. Dealing with entitled parents who actually used the phrases "I pay good money," "I pay your salary," and "I am the customer." And a clueless, powerless, incompetent administration who had no actual power over the running of the school and who didn't understand why I'd want to call social services when a child disclosed abuse. All this for less than half of what the public school teachers make in my city. I definitely didn't get paid enough for that shit. Was earning minimum wage for working in a claims call center for a health insurance company. I was called regarding a query on a claim where the person owed a certain amount of money to a psychiatric hospital for overstaying in the facility when he capped out the amount his insurance allowed. He was not happy about this. He proceeded to berate and belittle me for 45 minutes. Then put his wife on the phone, who told me in horrific detail how he tried to kill himself and why he needed to stay in the facility. It was gory. It was gruesome. And I still think about what she told me sometimes. At the end of the phone call I went and locked myself in the bathroom and cried. It was then I decided that job was no longer worth it, especially on the money I was on. I stuck it out for a bit longer and then moved abroad. Best decision I ever made. Dick deep in mud. Truding through a swamp in coastal Carolina with 100 pounds of gear on my back. Walking in mountainous terrain in East Africa at 115 degrees with 100 pounds of gear on my back. Standing post. Face first into the wind. At 15 degrees. For 8 hours stretches. With 50 pounds of gear on. Stuck in the back of an AAV with 30 people shoved in back. With packs. Gear and crew serve weapons. Top button up and engine bay open for 3 hours. When the sailors thought it was cute to start flooding the well deck before we loaded up for a 300 landing and it was 30 degrees. Doing a raid on a compound and being forced to bring Afghan police along so they can bang on the door before we have a cordon established. The realization that your 3-day op is really just code for inserting you by hello in the middle of empty desert and having you patrol back for 3 days. When fed. Who stood no post. Prepped no meals. Never left the wire at night. Never patrolled after 1,400 or farther than 3K and carried no packs, complained we were patrolling too fast. Realizing that the Marines who never left the free on board and had access to DFAC. Gyms. Laundromats. Fast food. Internet and recreation centers. Showers and toilets, the entire deployment make the same amount of money as you. I can really go on and on. Worked at a high-scale dog kennel during HS. It wasn't the literal piles of shit I had to deal with daily. It was the weird empty nest pet parents. The kind of people that wish each other happy Mother's Day for being fur parents. The people that carry fire pets around like fashion accessories. The animals were actually kind of fun to deal with. I got paid minimum wage to play with dogs and cats. A little shitty here or there was a fair trade-off. Anyway, I grew accustomed to the owners giving food and walk specifications. Some of the nicer kennels even had webcams so the owners, not calling them pet parents, could check in on them. This one lady wrote in the specifics that her pug must be read a bedtime story every night. I didn't pay attention and one night she called my boss absolutely livid that her dog didn't have a bedtime story. Demanded her stay calmed. I lose my job. Etc. Boss called me in. He told me what was wrong. And that he needed me to go to the drugstore and pick out a book to read to this lady's pug. His look told me even he knew this was bullshit. Not sure what happened after that, didn't come back. I used to be a case manager for adults with severe mental illness. One day I was meeting with a client in her home. She was experiencing auditory hallucinations that directed her to cut herself. She tells me, "The voices are saying to hurt myself." I say, "Can you ask them to wait until we're done?" She then says, "Now they are telling me to hurt you." Double quote. She then pulls the slowest ever turn of her head to look down at the table beside her, where I then notice 3 cheapo box cutters are sitting. Which is clearly what she's been using on her arm, and then just as slowly looks back at me. All without saying another word. I asked her for the box cutters, which she handed to me, and quickly ended the session. Nope, 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 nope. I work at a gym. I am only a front desk receptionist. I am a part-timer, also currently in college, getting paid minimum wage. I have been working at my location the longest out of all the other front desk people. So I often, especially on Sundays, open the gym and am there for 6 hours alone without any other employees since that's our slowest day of the week. I come in and open as usual and a lady comes up to me about 30 minutes later. Someone had pooped in the shower in the ladies' locker room and proceeded to try to waffle stomp it down. I was the one that had to clean it. Save my soul. Generally I have a 40-hour work week. Had done my 40 hours by end of Thursday. Had previously gotten the okay from my boss to leave 2 hours earlier on Friday. On Friday, 1 hour before I left, sales department immediately required some shit done which can only be done by me. Boss kindly asked me to complete this task. Completed the task but sat idle 3 hours longer than planned, +1 instead of -2. Completed the task and sent data to sales. Switched of PC and company phone and went for the weekend. Was shat on by director of sales on Monday morning because I was not available to answer some questions he had concerning the submitted data when he finally reviewed it roughly 1 hour after I had left work. As a teen I was working with a youth group from my church to help raise money for a trip. This guy had us over to his farm to do some work. Fair enough. We get there and he has us clean out his chicken coops. Most of the rooms were at least 6 inches deep in poop, while the average was probably closer to 10 inches. And some of the corners got up to about 1.5 feet. Buried in this poop were dead chickens, as well as several dead cats that had gone missing. It was a terrible, much more death-filled morning than I was anticipating. There were probably 7 or 8 of us there for half a day. And while I don't know the number, the guy probably didn't pay us more than $100. So like $3 an hour per person. Edit. I'm glad my highest voted comment is about poop. Also it has been pointed out that I'm bad at math. And the numbers I use don't make any sense together. I'm leaving it as is, keep me humble. The main point is that it was just a whole bunch of poo.